to deny this, and so what proof does he have to show? Those photographs. So you think Adlai has those photographs with him? I think I might be one short. Okay? But Adlai is no fool. This is pretty good. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So Adlai Stevenson is going to go in there and confront Zoran, right? The toughest hardliner there is. And then, how's he going to do it? He's going to throw out those photographs and he's going to get the job done. Okay? Make sure everybody has it. But Stevenson's going to, what's the best, you know what I used to love the most about administration? Is when you tell a kid, hey, I know you screwed up, tell me the truth and I'll punish you to the minimum, lie to me and I'll crush you. So I used to enjoy setting them up sometimes because I'd go in already knowing the truth, right? So here's the conversation. This is the following conversation that occurred between Stevenson and Zoran at the United Nations Security Council meeting. Zoran starts out because Stevenson comes in late because who's he been on the phone with? O'Donnell. He says, Zoran says, we are very glad you could join us, Mr. Stevenson. You know, just trying to make an ass out of me. For the last 2 hours, the entire world is asking only questions. The United States is pushing the entire world to the brink of catastrophe. The people of the world want to know why. We are told again and again about some incontrovertible evidence of offensive weapons to Cuba, but no evidence can be shown to us. Perhaps your spy planes are so secret that you're simply incapable to present such evidence. Perhaps the United States of America is simply mistaken. Huh? The chair now recognizes the representative from the United States. What doesn't Russia and Zoran know about? The latest flight over Cuba. They don't know that. Okay? They don't know that. That information has not gotten from Cuba to the Soviet Union that we did another low-level flight. Okay? Stevenson's reaction. Well, let me say something to you, Mr. Ambassador. We do have the evidence. We have it, and it is clear and incontrovertible. And let me say something else. These weapons must be taken out of Cuba. You, the Soviet Union, have created this new danger, not the United States. Finally, Mr. Zoran, I remind you that the other day you did not deny the existence of these weapons. But today, again, if I have heard you correctly, you now say they do not exist or that we haven't proved they exist. All right, sir, let me ask you one simple question. Do you, Ambassador Zoran, deny that the USSR has placed and is placing medium and intermediate range missiles and sites in Cuba? Yes or no? Don't wait for the translation. Yes or no? Zoran responds, I'm not in an American courtroom, sir, and therefore I do not wish to answer a question that is put to me in the fashion in which a prosecutor puts questions. In due course, sir, you will have your answer. Stevenson, you are in the courtroom of world opinion right now, and you can answer yes or no. You have denied that they existed, and I want to know whether I have understood you correctly. Zoran, continue with your statement. You will have your answer in due course. Stevenson, the famous line, I am prepared to wait for my answer until hell freezes over, if that's your decision. And I am also prepared to present the evidence in this room. The Soviet Union has lied to the world. Zoran says, if you have decided not to continue your statement, the chair recognizes the representative from Chile. Because he's the chairman and he can recognize whoever he wants in line to speak. And what does the representative from Chile do? Gives his time back to Stevenson. And with that, Stevenson pulls out the photographs of the Russian missiles and missile sites in Cuba, and the United States has the support they need from the United Nations to continue on with their task. This was huge. Nobody in the world thought Adlai Stevenson had the guts to pull something like this off. To say, I'm prepared to wait till hell freezes over. He just would not say that. That'd be like a Catholic priest cussing all the time. That just didn't happen. He couldn't believe it. They were fired up about it. So, we move on to Friday, October 26th then. We got a few more issues. It seems like it never ends. The morning of Friday, October 26th, President Kennedy received a telephone call from Secretary of State McNamara, who's still at the Pentagon. He's still there. So, Friday, October 26th, President Kennedy receives a telephone call from Secretary of State McNamara at the Pentagon. What are we still missing? That one Soviet ship. Remember, we took care of all of them but one. They let the Bucharest go through, right? We still had one. Well, what McNamara told the president, that the Navy actually lost location on this last Soviet tanker. It was called the Grozny, and they lost it during the night. So they actually lost the ship and its location. And he also informed Kennedy that that ship, the Grozny, crossed the quarantine line this morning. And they didn't know whether this thing had offensive weapons on it or not. It got away from it. So Kennedy gets the word from McNamara the morning of Friday, October 26th, that the Navy lost the final Soviet tanker, the Grozny. Lost track of it. And in the night, it actually crossed the quarantine line and was headed, if not already, to Cuba. And the concern is it probably had what? Maybe missiles on it. Well, they tried to signal the Grozny for over an hour. And finally, they found the Grozny past the quarantine line. Now, Admiral Anderson, George Anderson, he's at the Pentagon with McNamara. And he's in charge of the naval operations there. Okay? So they've located the Grozny. It passed the quarantine line. And after they found the Grozny, Admiral Anderson contacted the Pierce, remember that battleship, and ordered the captain to follow the rules of engagement that they had discussed earlier. Which the first thing was to do what? What's that? Radio them. And if they failed to stop, what was the next? When Bobby Kennedy said, "What if they fail to stop? What are we going to do?" Okay. So what Admiral Anderson did is he ordered shells to be fired across the bow of the Grozny. He's following the rules of engagement.
Wait, he called who first?
He didn't call anybody. McNamara called Kennedy and told him they lost the Grozny. Well, during this conversation, Anderson decides he's going to follow the rules of engagement when they find the Grozny, and he fires the shot over the bow of the ship. Well, who initially got upset when he heard the order to fire over the bow of the ship, and they actually did fire? Who got upset initially? No, because he's back at McNamara. Got wound up, man, and he got ticked off, and he ordered the firing to cease immediately. Well, McNamara basically yelled at Anderson in front of everybody, that was there, which really wasn't very military-like, but he was mad because what did the President of the United States say? There would be no shooting upon any Soviet ships without his explicit permission. And so Anderson and McNamara became involved in a very heated verbal discussion, and Anderson believed that McNamara's interference was going to get some of his men killed, because he's afraid the Grozny might do what? Fire upon the Pierce. And McNamara just got fired up, and he said, "There will be no firing on any Soviet ships without my explicit permission, and I will not order such firing unless I get permission from the President of the United States." So it was a very heated conversation. But they did fire a shot over the bow of the Grozny, and that could have started a lot of trouble. And we got lucky. Now this is kind of ironic, but finally the Grozny got stopped, and another ship that was out there with the Pierce was the USS Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. It also was out there. And it was actually members of the USS Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. that searched the Grozny for contraband, finding what? Weapons or no? No weapons. No. And as a result, the Grozny was allowed to proceed to Cuba. But it was another very tense time where we actually fired over the bow of that ship. And that could have really resulted in some trouble. So after they got the Grozny stopped, and really if you think about it, did Anderson do the right thing? Yeah. In a way he did, because the Grozny stopped, and the members from the USS Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. actually boarded the Grozny and inspected that ship and found nothing and let it go. But again, it was a tense time. Now, this is where it got kind of crazy. This same day, Cuban leader Fidel Castro wrote a private letter to who? Khrushchev. Okay? Because he's sitting back thinking, what's going to happen? We're about to get blown into the next century. So that day, during all this happening, Cuban leader Fidel Castro wrote a private letter to Premier Khrushchev, and he urged Khrushchev to initiate a nuclear first strike against the United States if indeed the United States invaded Cuba. So Castro gets in the picture, and he pleads with Premier Khrushchev in the Soviet Union, listen, if they invade Cuba, if they strike us, I'm really wanting you to initiate a nuclear first strike against the United States. That's how serious this got. Castro got real nervous he was going to be invaded. And he said to Khrushchev, if we are invaded or attacked by the United States, we would like you to send a first strike nuclear weapon against the United States. What's the problem here? Who has not really talked at all through this? Who's not? What? And who? Right. The problem has been, at this point in the Cuban Missile Crisis, both President Kennedy and Premier Khrushchev are finding it difficult to communicate with each other. And both of them are feeling the heat of who? Their military. Both militaries are putting heat on these guys to kick ass and take names. And both of them know deep down, if they do that, we're going to have a big issue here. So the biggest problem with the crisis so far is the two most important people in the world, powerful people in the world, haven't had the ability to communicate other than one letter up and one letter back. And that's becoming an issue. So again, just remember, at this point in the crisis, both the President and Premier Khrushchev are finding it very difficult to communicate with each other, and both men are really, really feeling the heat from their military to get after it. Okay? We'll leave you with this. As tension continues to mount, and this poor communication between the two world leaders is evident, this crisis is going to take the weirdest U-turn you've ever seen. And something's going to happen that allows these two leaders to communicate without their militaries knowing they're communicating. It is the weirdest story you could ever believe that is actually going to help solve this crisis. And we'll tell you about that tomorrow. Because two people are going to step into this that you wouldn't even imagine would have anything to do with it and help solve the problem. Well, that's a good guess for nothing. Okay, so what's due tomorrow? That blue sheet I gave you. As soon as we get here, we're not going to go to the Commons. I think we've got a lot of other people tested in the Commons tomorrow. We'll just take that matching quiz right here tomorrow. Okay? And if you know those names, you'll be in good shape.